Tonight, the boundaries between sand and sky dissolve like ancient ink on weathered parchment. Feel the air filled with the whisper of turning pages and the soft glow of oil lamps that have illuminated wisdom for 1,000 years. If this journey awakens your soul, join us again and whisper from where you listen to us. Now, let the modern world fade gently, breathe deeply. Let us dream with memories written in Arabic script and preserved in the hearts of desert scholars. I walk through the narrow streets of Timbuktu as the evening call to prayer echoes across the ancient city, where the golden light of countless oil lamps begins to flicker in windows and doorways like earthbound stars. Here, in this legendary crossroads of the Sahara, the day's heat gives way to the cool embrace of night. And with it comes the sacred time when scholars emerge from their homes carrying manuscripts that hold the accumulated wisdom of centuries. The scent of burning oil mingles with the dry desert air as I pass house after house where families gather around low tables, their precious books spread before them like treasures more valuable than gold or salt. These are the manuscript libraries of Timbuktu, collections that have been passed down through generations of learned families who understand that knowledge is the most precious inheritance one can leave to the future. In the flickering candlelight, I glimpse pages covered with elegant Arabic calligraphy, the flowing script dancing in the wavering flames like living poetry. Each manuscript tells a story not just through its words, but through its very existence. The careful selection of paper, the grinding of inks from minerals and plants, the patient hours spent by scribes whose hands moved with the precision of master craftsmen and the devotion of true believers. The Ahmed Baba Institute stands before me like a beacon of learning in the gathering darkness, its modern facade housing nearly 30,000 manuscripts that represent only a fraction of the literary treasures scattered throughout this remarkable city. Named after the great 16th century scholar Ahmed Baba al-Timbuktu, the Institute serves as both guardian and gateway to an intellectual tradition that stretches back over a millennium. I pause outside a family compound where an elderly scholar sits cross-legged on a woven mat, a manuscript open before him as his grandson watches with rapt attention. The old man's finger traces the ancient text as he reads aloud, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and the promise of continuity. This is how knowledge has been transmitted in Timbuktu for centuries, not through formal institutions alone, but through the intimate bonds between generations that ensure wisdom never dies. The manuscripts themselves seem to glow in the lamplight, their pages bearing witness to the extraordinary intellectual flowering that made Timbuktu one of the great centers of learning in the medieval world. Here are works on astronomy that mapped the movements of stars across the African sky, treatises on medicine that preserved healing knowledge from across the Islamic world, and philosophical texts that grappled with the deepest questions of human existence. The paper on which these treasures are written tells its own story of trade and cultural exchange. Some manuscripts are written on paper made from cotton grown in the fertile valleys of the Niger River, while others bear the watermarks of mills in distant lands, carried across the Sahara by merchants who understood that books were among the most valuable commodities they could transport. The inks that flow across these pages were created from recipes passed down through generations of scribes, each color carrying its own significance and symbolic meaning. Black ink made from iron gall speaks of permanence and authority, while red highlights mark passages of particular importance. Gold ink, reserved for the most sacred texts, catches the candlelight and seems to burn with inner fire. As night deepens around me, I understand that I am witnessing something far more profound than mere scholarship. These manuscript libraries represent the living heart of a civilization that valued learning above all earthly treasures, where the pursuit of knowledge was considered the highest calling, and where books were cherished as windows into the divine mind. The scholars who tend these collections are the inheritors of a tradition that spans continents and centuries, connecting the libraries of Timbuktu to the great centers of learning in Baghdad, Cairo, Cordoba, and beyond. They are the guardians of humanity's intellectual heritage, preserving in their desert city treasures that illuminate the rich complexity of African civilization and its contributions to world culture. The evening air carries the sound of rustling pages as scholars throughout the city settle into their nightly routines of study and contemplation. In one house, a young student practices his calligraphy under the watchful eye of his master. Each stroke of the reed pen a meditation on the sacred nature of written knowledge. In another, a group of learned men debate the finer points of Islamic jurisprudence, their voices rising and falling in the rhythmic cadences of scholarly discourse. The tradition of manuscript collecting in Timbuktu extends back to the city's golden age in the 15th and 16th centuries, when it served as the intellectual capital of the Songhai Empire. During this period, the University of Songkor attracted scholars from across the Islamic world, creating a cosmopolitan atmosphere where ideas flowed as freely as the trade goods that made the city wealthy.
The private libraries that dot the city today are the direct descendants of those medieval collections, carefully preserved through centuries of political upheaval and environmental challenges. Each family library tells the story of its founders, merchants who invested their profits in books, scholars who copied texts by hand, and religious leaders who understood that preserving knowledge was a sacred duty. The physical act of maintaining these manuscripts requires constant vigilance against the harsh desert environment. The dry air that helps preserve the paper also makes it brittle, while occasional sandstorms can damage exposed texts. Families have developed elaborate storage systems using wooden chests, leather wrappings, and specially designed rooms that protect their treasures from both natural and human threats. The social organization of Timbuktu's scholarly community reflects the deep respect accorded to learning and literacy. Families take pride in their manuscript collections, viewing them as symbols of their intellectual heritage and social standing. The most prestigious families are often those with the largest and most diverse libraries, their reputations built on generations of scholarly achievement. The economic value of these manuscripts extends far beyond their monetary worth to encompass their role as cultural capital that defines the identity of Timbuktu itself. The city's reputation as a center of learning rests largely on these collections, which serve as tangible proof of Africa's rich intellectual traditions and its central role in the medieval Islamic world. The soft scratch of reed pens against parchment fills the night air as I enter the workshop of Mester Mahmoud, whose weathered hands have spent 40 years copying the sacred texts that form the backbone of Timbuktu's intellectual tradition. Here, in this humble room lit by a single oil lamp, the ancient art of manuscript creation continues as it has for centuries. Each stroke of the pen a prayer, and each completed page a small victory against the forces of ignorance and forgetting. Mahmoud's fingers, stained permanently black from decades of handling ink, move with the fluid grace of a master calligrapher as he traces the elegant curves of Arabic script across a fresh sheet of handmade paper. His eyes, though dimmed by age and countless hours of close work, still possess the keen focus necessary for the precise art of copying sacred texts. Every letter must be perfect, every word positioned with mathematical precision, for these manuscripts will outlive their creator and carry his devotion into future generations. The tools of his trade are arranged with ceremonial care on the low table before him. Reed pens of varying thickness lie in neat rows, each one carefully cut and shaped for specific types of script. Bottles of ink in different colors catch the lamplight like liquid jewels, deep black for the main text, rich red for chapter headings, and precious gold for the most sacred passages. The paper itself is a work of art, made from cotton fibers beaten to perfect smoothness and sized with a mixture of starch and gum arabic that will help the ink flow evenly across its surface. The manuscript Mahmud is copying tonight is a treatise on Islamic law written by a 14th century scholar from Cordoba. Its complex legal arguments requiring not just accurate transcription, but deep understanding of the subject matter. As a master scribe, Mahmud must be more than a mere copyist. He must be a scholar in his own right, capable of recognizing errors in his source text and making informed decisions about variant readings and textual corrections. The process of creating a manuscript begins long before the first word is written. The paper must be prepared through a laborious process that starts with the selection of cotton fibers, which are then cleaned, beaten, and formed into sheets using techniques that have remained unchanged for centuries. The quality of the paper determines not only the appearance of the finished manuscript, but also its longevity, making this initial stage crucial to the preservation of knowledge. The preparation of ink follows equally ancient formulas, with each color requiring different ingredients and techniques. Black ink is made from iron gall nuts mixed with gum arabic and water, creating a permanent medium that will resist fading for centuries. Red ink comes from cinnabar or red ochre, while the precious gold ink is created by grounding actual gold leaf with honey and gum arabic, producing a medium reserved only for the most important texts.
The act of writing itself is a meditation on the sacred nature of knowledge. Mahmud begins each session with ritual ablutions and prayers, acknowledging that he serves as a conduit for divine wisdom rather than merely a craftsman producing a commercial product. His posture, breathing, and mental state must all be properly aligned before he can begin the delicate work of transferring sacred words from one manuscript to another. The calligraphic styles employed by Timbuktu scribes reflect the cosmopolitan nature of the city's intellectual culture. Maghrebi script, with its distinctive angular forms, predominates in texts from North Africa and Al-Andalus, while Sudani script shows the influence of local African traditions. The most accomplished scribes master multiple styles, choosing the appropriate script for each text based on its origin and intended use. The workshop itself is designed to support the demanding requirements of manuscript production. The lighting must be carefully controlled to avoid eye strain while providing sufficient illumination for detailed work. The temperature and humidity are regulated through the strategic placement of water vessels and the careful management of airflow, creating an environment that protects both the scribe and his materials from the harsh desert climate. The social status of scribes in Timbuktu reflects the high value placed on literacy and learning in Islamic culture. Master scribes like Mahmud are respected members of the scholarly community, their skills essential to the preservation and transmission of knowledge. They often serve as teachers as well as copyists, passing their techniques to carefully selected apprentices who will carry the tradition forward. The economic aspects of manuscript production create a complex network of relationships between scribes, scholars, and patrons. Wealthy families commission copies of important texts for their private libraries, while religious institutions require multiple copies of essential works for teaching and reference. The cost of a manuscript reflects not only the materials and labor involved, but also the rarity and importance of the text being copied. The apprenticeship system that trains new scribes follows traditional patterns that emphasize both technical skill and spiritual development. Young students begin by learning to prepare materials and maintain tools, gradually progressing to simple copying exercises before being entrusted with important texts. The master-apprentice relationship extends beyond mere instruction to encompass moral guidance and spiritual mentorship. The sound of camel bells echoes across the pre-dawn darkness as I witness the arrival of a caravan from the north, its precious cargo of manuscripts wrapped in oiled leather and packed in specially designed wooden chests that have protected these literary treasures during their perilous journey across the Sahara. Here, at the edge of Timbuktu's bustling market quarter, the ancient trade routes that connected North Africa to the Sudan converge, bringing not only gold and salt, but the even more valuable currency of knowledge and ideas. The caravan master, his face weathered by years of desert travel, personally oversees the unloading of the manuscript chests, understanding that these books represent wealth beyond measure to the scholars and collectors who await their arrival. Each chest bears the seal of its owner and detailed inventories written in multiple languages, for these are international shipments that connect the libraries of Timbuktu to the great centers of learning in Cairo, Tunis, Fez, and beyond. I watch as the first chest is opened, revealing manuscripts wrapped in silk cloth that has been treated with aromatic oils to repel insects and preserve the delicate paper within. The books emerge like sleeping treasures awakening to the light, their leather bindings still supple despite months of travel, their pages intact and ready to take their place in the libraries that have commissioned their acquisition. The merchant who has organized this particular shipment is Ahmad ibn Yusuf, a man whose family has been involved in the book trade for 5 generations. His knowledge of manuscripts rivals that of many scholars, for he must be able to evaluate the authenticity, condition, and value of texts in languages and scripts from across the Islamic world. His reputation for honesty and expertise has made him the preferred agent for many of Timbuktu's most prestigious libraries. The books in this caravan represent the fruits of a vast network of scribes, scholars, and collectors that spans the entire Islamic world. Some are original works by contemporary authors, while others are copies of classical texts that have been carefully reproduced in the scriptoriums of distant cities. Each manuscript carries with it not only its textual content, but also the cultural DNA of its place of origin, creating a living library that reflects the diversity and unity of Islamic civilization. The process of acquiring manuscripts for Timbuktu's libraries begins with detailed correspondence between local scholars and their counterparts in other cities. Letters travel with the caravans, carrying requests for specific texts, inquiries about the availability of rare works, and negotiations over prices and terms of sale. This correspondence network creates an intellectual community that transcends political boundaries and geographical distances. The financing of manuscript acquisition requires sophisticated commercial arrangements that reflect the high value and specialized nature of the book trade. Wealthy families often pool their resources to commission expensive copies of important works, while religious institutions rely on endowments and donations to build their collections. The most valuable manuscripts may require years of negotiation and payment in installments before they can be acquired. The physical challenges of transporting manuscripts across the Sahara have led to the development of specialized packing and preservation techniques. Books are wrapped in multiple layers of protective materials, with aromatic substances added to repel insects and moisture-absorbing materials included to prevent damage from humidity changes. The wooden chests themselves are works of craftsmanship, designed with tight-fitting joints and reinforced corners that can withstand the rigors of desert travel. The seasonal nature of trans-Saharan trade creates rhythms in the manuscript market that scholars must carefully navigate. The arrival of caravans during the dry season brings fresh supplies of books and materials, while the rainy season forces a temporary halt to long-distance trade. Collectors must plan their acquisitions carefully, placing orders months in advance and waiting patiently for the next trading season to bring their purchases to fruition. The cultural exchange facilitated by the manuscript trade extends far beyond the simple transfer of books from one location to another. Each caravan brings news of intellectual developments in distant cities, reports of new discoveries and innovations, and personal messages between scholars who may never meet in person but maintain lifelong correspondences through the medium of the trade routes. The quality control exercised by manuscript merchants requires expertise that combines commercial acumen with scholarly knowledge. Merchants must be able to authenticate texts, evaluate the skill of different scribes, and assess the condition of manuscripts that may have been damaged during previous journeys. Their reputations depend on their ability to deliver books that meet the exacting standards of their scholarly clientele.
The economic impact of the manuscript trade on Timbuktu extends beyond the immediate transactions to encompass the entire ecosystem of intellectual activity that the books support. The arrival of new texts stimulates scholarly debate and research, while the presence of rare works attracts visiting scholars who contribute to the city's reputation as a center of learning. This intellectual activity, in turn, generates demand for local scribes, bookbinders, and other craftsmen who support the manuscript industry.
The preservation of manuscripts during transport requires constant vigilance against the many threats that can destroy books in the harsh desert environment. Sandstorms can penetrate even the most carefully sealed containers, while extreme temperature variations can cause paper to become brittle and inks to fade. The most experienced caravan masters develop almost supernatural abilities to predict weather patterns and choose routes that minimize exposure to these dangers. The social networks created by the manuscript trade connect Timbuktu to a vast community of scholars, collectors, and merchants who share a common commitment to the preservation and transmission of knowledge. These relationships often span generations, with families maintaining trading partnerships that endure for centuries and create bonds of trust that facilitate the movement of valuable and irreplaceable texts across vast distances. The arrival of each caravan is a moment of celebration and anticipation for Timbuktu's scholarly community, as collectors gather to examine the new arrivals and compete for the most desirable texts. The market that emerges around these transactions is both commercial and intellectual, with prices determined not only by rarity and condition, but also by the scholarly reputation of the texts and their authors. The legacy of this manuscript trade continues to shape Timbuktu's identity as a center of learning, with the city's libraries serving as repositories for texts that represent the accumulated wisdom of the entire Islamic world. The books that arrived by camel caravans centuries ago continue to be studied and copied today, their knowledge as relevant and valuable as it was when they first crossed the desert sands. The morning sun casts long shadows across the courtyard of the University of Sankore as I join the stream of students and scholars making their way to the day's first lectures, their arms laden with manuscripts that will serve as both textbooks and objects of intense scholarly debate. Here, in this ancient seat of learning that once attracted over 25,000 students from across the Islamic world, the tradition of rigorous intellectual inquiry continues to flourish under the guidance of masters whose knowledge spans the breadth of human understanding. The university's distinctive mud brick architecture rises before me like a monument to the power of human learning, its towering minaret serving as both a call to prayer and a beacon that has guided seekers of knowledge across the desert for centuries. The building itself embodies the synthesis of spiritual and intellectual pursuits that characterizes Islamic education, with its mosques serving as the heart of an institution where religious devotion and scholarly inquiry are understood to be complementary rather than competing endeavors. I enter the main lecture hall where Master Abdullah ibn Muhammad prepares to deliver his morning discourse on Islamic jurisprudence, his personal library of over 300 manuscripts arranged on wooden stands around his teaching platform. His students, ranging in age from young boys to gray-bearded scholars, sit cross-legged on woven mats with their own collections of texts spread before them, ready to follow complex arguments that will draw upon sources from across the Islamic legal tradition. The pedagogical methods employed at Sankore reflect centuries of refinement in the art of Islamic education. Master Abdullah begins his lecture not with a simple exposition of legal principles, but with a question that challenges his students to think critically about the relationship between divine law and human interpretation. The ensuing discussion will involve careful analysis of Quranic verses, examination of prophetic traditions, and consideration of the opinions of various legal schools, all supported by reference to the manuscripts that contain this accumulated wisdom. The curriculum at Sankore encompasses far more than religious studies, reflecting the Islamic understanding that all knowledge ultimately derives from divine sources and therefore deserves serious scholarly attention. Students study astronomy and mathematics alongside theology and law,
learning to calculate the movements of celestial bodies with the same precision they apply to the interpretation of sacred texts. The manuscripts that support these studies include works by the greatest minds of the Islamic world, from al-Khwarizmi's treatises on algebra to Ibn Sina's medical texts. The library system that supports the university's educational mission represents one of the most sophisticated information networks of the medieval world. The central collection, housed within the university buildings, is supplemented by the private libraries of individual masters, creating a distributed system that provides access to hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on every conceivable subject. Students learn not only to read and understand these texts, but also to navigate the complex bibliographic relationships that connect different works and authors. The international character of Sankor's student body creates a cosmopolitan atmosphere where ideas from different regions and traditions can interact and cross-fertilize. Students from Egypt bring knowledge of the latest developments in Cairo's Al-Azhar University, while those from Al-Andalus contribute insights from the libraries of Cordoba and Seville. This intellectual diversity is reflected in the university's manuscript collections, which include works in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and various African languages. The daily rhythm of university life follows patterns established by centuries of Islamic educational tradition. The day begins before dawn with communal prayers, followed by the first lectures that take advantage of the cool morning air and fresh minds. The midday break allows for private study and copying of texts, while the afternoon sessions focus on more advanced topics that require the full attention of mature scholars. Evening discussions often continue long into the night, with small groups of students and masters exploring complex questions in intimate settings. The examination system at Sankor emphasizes not mere memorization, but deep understanding and the ability to apply knowledge to new situations. Students must demonstrate their mastery of texts by engaging in formal debates, composing original treatises, and solving complex problems that require synthesis of material from multiple sources. The most accomplished students may be invited to add their own commentaries to existing manuscripts, contributing to the ongoing development of Islamic scholarship. The economic support for the university comes from a complex network of endowments, donations, and commercial activities that reflects the high value placed on education in Islamic society. Wealthy merchants and rulers compete to fund new buildings, purchase rare manuscripts, and support promising students, understanding that their investments in education will yield benefits that extend far beyond their own lifetimes. The university's own commercial activities, including the copying and sale of manuscripts, provide additional revenue that helps maintain its independence and scholarly integrity. The master-student relationships that form the core of Sankor's educational system create bonds that often last for decades, with successful students maintaining correspondence with their teachers long after graduation, and sometimes returning to teach at their alma mater. These relationships create networks of scholarly influence that extend across the Islamic world, with Sankor graduates carrying their university's reputation to positions of influence in distant lands. The preservation and transmission of knowledge at Sankor involves not only the formal curriculum, but also the informal processes by which scholarly traditions are passed from one generation to the next. Students learn not only what to think, but how to think, absorbing methodological approaches and intellectual habits that will serve them throughout their careers. The manuscripts they study become models not only for content, but also for the proper forms of scholarly discourse and argumentation. The research activities conducted at Sankor contribute to the ongoing development of Islamic scholarship, with masters and advanced students producing original works that add to the store of human knowledge. These new texts are carefully copied and distributed to other centers of learning, ensuring that Sankor's intellectual contributions reach the widest possible audience. The university's reputation for scholarly excellence makes its productions highly sought after by collectors and libraries throughout the Islamic world. The legacy of Sankor's educational mission extends far beyond the formal boundaries of the university, to encompass the entire intellectual culture of Timbuktu and the broader West African region. The scholars trained at Sankor carry their learning to positions of influence throughout society, serving as judges, administrators, teachers, and advisors who help shape the development of Islamic civilization in Africa. Their manuscripts, whether copied from existing sources or composed as original works, continue to circulate and influence new generations of students and scholars.
The evening shadows lengthen as I am welcomed into the private library of the Al-Wangari family, where 4 generations of scholars have assembled one of Timbuktu's most treasured manuscript collections in the intimate setting of their ancestral home. Here, surrounded by wooden shelves that reach from floor to ceiling, I witness the profound truth that in Timbuktu, every family of learning is also a library, and every library is a sacred trust passed down through bloodlines that value knowledge above all earthly possessions. The patriarch of the family, Imam al-Wangari, moves with reverent care among the manuscripts that represent his life's work and his ancestors' legacy, his weathered hands selecting volumes with the practiced ease of a man who knows each book's location, condition, and contents by heart. These are not merely possessions, but living members of the family, each manuscript carrying within its pages the intellectual DNA of generations who understood that preserving knowledge was both a sacred duty and a form of immortality. The collection itself tells the story of a family's intellectual journey across centuries, with the oldest manuscripts dating back to the 13th century, when the first al-Wangari scholar began acquiring texts during his pilgrimage to Mecca. Each subsequent generation has added to the collection, guided by a family tradition that requires every male heir to contribute at least one significant manuscript before he can claim his inheritance. This practice has created a library that reflects not only scholarly interests, but also the evolving intellectual currents of Islamic civilization. The physical organization of the library follows principles that balance practical accessibility with symbolic meaning. The most sacred texts, copies of the Quran and collections of prophetic traditions, occupy the highest shelves, their elevated position reflecting their spiritual importance. Works of theology and law fill the middle sections, while secular subjects like medicine, astronomy, and literature are housed at eye level, where they can be easily consulted during daily study sessions. The preservation methods employed by the al-Wangari family represent centuries of accumulated wisdom about protecting manuscripts in the harsh desert environment. Each book is wrapped in specially treated leather that has been infused with aromatic oils to repel insects, while the shelves themselves are constructed from cedar wood, whose natural properties help regulate humidity and discourage pests. The room's windows are positioned to provide adequate light for reading while preventing direct sunlight from fading the delicate inks and papers. The cataloging system used by the family combines traditional Islamic bibliographic methods with innovations developed through generations of practical experience. Each manuscript is assigned a unique identifier that indicates its subject matter, date of acquisition, and condition, while detailed inventories record not only the contents of each volume, but also its provenance, copying history, and any unique features that distinguishes it from other versions of the same text. The daily rituals surrounding the use of the library reflect the family's understanding that these manuscripts are not merely books, but sacred objects that require proper respect and handling. Before touching any manuscript, family members perform ritual ablutions and recite prayers asking for divine guidance in their studies. The books themselves are never placed directly on the ground or handled carelessly, and eating or drinking in the library is strictly forbidden to prevent accidental damage to the precious texts. The educational role of the family library extends beyond the immediate household to encompass the broader scholarly community of Timbuktu. Advanced students from the University of Sankore regularly visit to consult rare texts that exist nowhere else, while visiting scholars from distant lands are welcomed as honored guests who contribute to the intellectual life of the family through their discussions and debates. These interactions create networks of scholarly exchange that connect the al-Wangari library to the wider world of Islamic learning. The economic value of the collection is understood by the family to be secondary to its intellectual and spiritual worth.
Yet they are not naive about the material realities of manuscript preservation. The most valuable texts are ensured through complex arrangements with merchant families who understand the unique nature of these assets, while the family maintains detailed records of each manuscript's estimated value for inheritance and insurance purposes. The copying activities conducted within the family library serve both to preserve existing texts and to generate income that supports the collection's maintenance and growth. Skilled family members work as professional scribes, producing copies of rare texts for other collectors, while simultaneously creating backup copies of their own most precious manuscripts. This dual purpose ensures that the family's scholarly activities contribute to both their own library's preservation and the broader dissemination of knowledge.
The women of the Al-Wangari family play crucial but often overlooked roles in maintaining the library's operations. While Islamic tradition may limit their direct participation in formal scholarly activities, they are responsible for many of the practical aspects of manuscript preservation, including the preparation of protective wrappings, the maintenance of storage containers, and the creation of the aromatic compounds used to protect books from insects and decay. The succession planning that governs the library's future reflects the family's long-term commitment to preserving their intellectual heritage. Each generation is trained from childhood in the proper care and handling of manuscripts, while formal agreements ensure that the collection will never be divided or sold regardless of the family's financial circumstances. These arrangements create a form of intellectual entailment that protects the library from the vicissitudes of individual fortune or family disputes. The spiritual dimension of the family's relationship with their manuscripts transforms what might otherwise be mere collecting into a form of religious devotion. The Al-Wangari family understands that they serve as temporary custodians of knowledge that belongs ultimately to God and to humanity as a whole. This understanding infuses their daily interactions with the books with a sense of sacred responsibility that transcends personal ownership or pride. The social status that the library confers upon the Al-Wangari family reflects the high value placed on learning and scholarship in Timbuktu society. Their reputation as guardians of rare and important texts makes them influential figures in the city's intellectual life, while their willingness to share their resources with serious scholars earns them respect and gratitude from the broader academic community. This social capital, built over generations of scholarly service, represents one of the most valuable aspects of their inheritance. The future challenges facing the family library include not only the ongoing threats of environmental damage and political instability, but also the changing nature of scholarship itself. As new technologies and methodologies transform the way knowledge is created and transmitted, the Al-Wangari family must find ways to preserve their traditional role while adapting to contemporary realities that may require new approaches to manuscript preservation and scholarly access.
The midnight oil burns low as I enter the scriptorium where Master Yusuf and his apprentices work through the darkest hours, their reed pens moving in steady rhythm across fresh parchment while the rest of Timbuktu sleeps. Here, in this sanctuary of learning, illuminated only by the warm glow of oil lamps, the sacred work of copying manuscripts continues without pause, for these nocturnal scribes understand that knowledge is too precious to wait for daylight and too urgent to postpone until tomorrow. The soft scratching of pens against paper creates a gentle symphony that speaks of patience, devotion, and the eternal human desire to preserve wisdom for future generations. Master Yusuf, his eyes strained from decades of close work, but his hands still steady and sure, guides his apprentices through the intricate process of reproducing a 14th century treatise on astronomy, each letter formed with the precision of a master craftsman and the reverence of a true believer. The choice to work by candlelight is not merely practical, but deeply symbolic, connecting these modern scribes to centuries of scholars who labored in similar conditions to preserve the intellectual heritage of Islamic civilization. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across the pages, creating an atmosphere of mystery and sanctity that transforms the mechanical act of copying into something approaching divine communion. The apprentices who work under Master Yusuf's guidance represent the future of Timbuktu's scribal tradition. Young men who have dedicated their lives to mastering an art that requires not only technical skill, but also deep spiritual commitment. They begin their training by learning to prepare materials, cutting reed pens to the proper angle, mixing inks to the correct consistency, and preparing paper surfaces to receive the sacred texts they will spend their lives reproducing. The progression from apprentice to master follows a carefully structured path that may take decades to complete. Students begin by copying simple texts under close supervision, gradually advancing to more complex works as their skills develop. The most talented may eventually be entrusted with rare and precious manuscripts, while the truly exceptional few may be invited to add their own commentaries and annotations to the texts they copy. The physical demands of nocturnal copying require extraordinary discipline and endurance. The scribes must maintain perfect posture for hours at a time, their bodies positioned to minimize fatigue while maximizing precision. Their eyes must adapt to the limited light available from oil lamps, developing an almost supernatural ability to distinguish subtle variations in ink color and paper texture that might escape notice in brighter illumination.
The mental concentration required for accurate copying approaches a meditative state, with scribes learning to empty their minds of all distractions and focus entirely on the text before them. This level of concentration is not merely technical but spiritual, as the scribes understand that they serve as conduits for divine wisdom rather than mere mechanical reproducers of written words. The quality control exercised in the scriptorium is extraordinarily rigorous, with each completed page subjected to multiple levels of review before being accepted as part of the finished manuscript. Master Yusuf personally examines every line, checking not only for accuracy in copying, but also for proper letter formation, consistent spacing, and appropriate use of decorative elements. Errors, when discovered, are corrected using techniques that preserve the integrity of the text while acknowledging the fallibility of human copyists. The materials used in the scriptorium represent the finest available anywhere in the Islamic world. The paper is made from cotton fibers that have been carefully selected and processed to create surfaces of exceptional smoothness and durability. The inks are prepared according to ancient formulas that ensure both permanence and beauty, with each color mixed fresh daily to maintain optimal consistency and flow. The economic arrangements that support the scriptorium reflect the high value placed on manuscript production in Timbuktu society. Wealthy patrons commission copies of important texts for their private libraries, while religious institutions require multiple copies of essential works for teaching and reference. The prices charged for these services reflect not only the materials and labor involved, but also the rarity and importance of the texts being copied. The social relationships within the scriptorium create a community bound together by shared commitment to the preservation of knowledge. Master and apprentice relationships often extend beyond mere instruction to encompass spiritual guidance and personal mentorship, while the bonds formed between fellow scribes create networks of mutual support that last throughout their careers. The preservation of scribal techniques represents one of the most important functions of the scriptorium, as the knowledge required to produce high-quality manuscripts encompasses not only calligraphy but also chemistry, papermaking, and bookbinding. This technical knowledge is as carefully guarded and transmitted as the textual content of the manuscripts themselves, ensuring that future generations will possess the skills necessary to continue the tradition. The spiritual dimension of nocturnal copying transforms what might otherwise be tedious labor into an act of worship and devotion. The scribes understand that they participate in the divine act of creation when they bring new copies of sacred texts into existence, making knowledge available to future generations of scholars and believers. This understanding infuses their work with a sense of purpose that transcends commercial considerations.
The challenges faced by nocturnal scribes include not only the physical demands of working by lamplight, but also the psychological pressures of maintaining accuracy while fighting fatigue and eye strain. The most experienced scribes develop techniques for managing these challenges, including specific breathing exercises, periodic rest breaks, and dietary practices that help maintain alertness throughout the long night hours. The products of the scriptorium represent more than mere copies of existing texts. They are new creations that carry within them the spiritual energy and devotion of their creators. Each manuscript bears the subtle marks of its scribe's personality and skill, creating unique objects that are valued not only for their textual content, but also for their artistic and spiritual qualities. The legacy of these nocturnal scribes extends far beyond the manuscripts they produce to encompass their role in maintaining the intellectual vitality of Timbuktu itself. Their dedication to preserving and transmitting knowledge ensures that the city's reputation as a center of learning will continue to attract scholars and students from across the Islamic world, perpetuating a tradition that has flourished for over a millennium. The quiet heroism of these midnight workers, laboring in obscurity while others sleep, embodies the selfless devotion to knowledge that characterizes the best of Islamic scholarly tradition. Their willingness to sacrifice comfort and convenience for the sake of preserving wisdom represents a form of jihad, a struggle in the path of God that serves the highest purposes of human civilization.
The morning marketplace comes alive with the distinctive calls of book merchants as I wander through the quarter where knowledge is bought and sold like any other precious commodity, yet treated with a reverence that elevates commerce to the level of sacred ritual. Here, beneath colorful awnings that protect delicate manuscripts from the harsh desert sun, dealers in wisdom spread their wares on carpeted stalls, while scholars and collectors examine potential acquisitions with the careful attention of jewelers evaluating precious stones. The most prominent of these merchants is Haj Ibrahim al-Kitabi, whose family has been in the book trade for 7 generations and whose reputation for honesty and expertise extends from Timbuktu to the great libraries of Cairo and Baghdad. His stall occupies a prime position near the mosque, its shelves lined with manuscripts that represent the intellectual treasures of the entire Islamic world, each volume carefully cataloged and priced according to its rarity, condition, and scholarly importance. I watch as Haj Ibrahim demonstrates his expertise to a potential customer, a visiting scholar from Fez who seeks a particular commentary on Islamic law. The merchant's hands move with practiced care as he retrieves several relevant texts, explaining the differences between various editions and pointing out the unique features that distinguish one copy from another. His knowledge encompasses not only the contents of the books, but also their provenance, the reputations of their scribes, and the historical circumstances of their creation. The economics of the manuscript trade reflect the complex relationship between intellectual and material value that characterizes Islamic civilization. A single rare text may be worth more than a house, while common works can be acquired for the price of a good meal. The factors that determine value include not only rarity and condition, but also the reputation of the author, the skill of the scribe, and the importance of the text to contemporary scholarly debates. The seasonal rhythms of the book trade follow the patterns of trans-Saharan commerce, with the arrival of caravans bringing fresh supplies of manuscripts from distant cities while creating demand for local products that will travel to markets in North Africa and the Middle East. The most successful merchants maintain networks of correspondence in major cities, who alert them to the availability of important texts and help them identify potential customers for their own offerings. The authentication of manuscripts requires expertise that combines scholarly knowledge with practical experience in evaluating the physical characteristics of books. Merchants must be able to distinguish genuine antiques from recent copies, identify the work of specific scribes, and detect alterations or repairs that might affect a manuscript's value.
This expertise is developed through years of handling thousands of books and learning from the mistakes and successes of previous transactions.
The social dynamics of the manuscript market create a community of scholars, collectors, and merchants who share a common passion for books and learning. Regular customers develop relationships with their preferred dealers that extend beyond mere commercial transactions to encompass intellectual discussions, scholarly advice, and personal friendship. These relationships often span decades and create networks of trust that facilitate the movement of valuable and rare texts. The storage and display of manuscripts in the marketplace requires specialized knowledge and equipment to protect delicate books from the environmental hazards of outdoor commerce. Merchants use specially designed cases with tight-fitting lids to protect their wares from dust and moisture, while valuable texts are kept in locked containers that can be quickly secured in case of theft or sudden weather changes. The negotiation process for valuable manuscripts follows elaborate protocols that reflect both the commercial and intellectual dimensions of the transaction. Serious buyers are invited to examine texts in detail, often spending hours reviewing a single manuscript while discussing its merits with the merchant and other knowledgeable observers. Prices are rarely fixed, with the final cost depending on factors that include the buyer's scholarly reputation, the urgency of their need, and the merchant's assessment of the text's future availability. The financing of major manuscript purchases often requires complex arrangements that may involve multiple parties and extended payment schedules. Wealthy collectors may commission merchants to acquire specific texts on their behalf, providing advance payments that allow dealers to bid aggressively at auctions or private sales. Religious institutions and scholarly families sometimes pool their resources to acquire expensive works that will benefit the entire community. The international character of the manuscript trade connects Timbuktu to a global network of scholars and collectors who share information about available texts and coordinate their acquisition efforts. Letters travel with the caravans, carrying news of important discoveries, reports of manuscripts for sale, and requests for specific works that may be available in distant markets. The quality control exercised by reputable merchants protects buyers from fraud while maintaining the integrity of the market as a whole. Established dealers stake their reputations on the accuracy of their descriptions and the authenticity of their offerings, understanding that a single instance of deception could destroy relationships built over decades of honest dealing. The educational role of manuscript merchants extends beyond mere commerce to encompass their function as informal advisors to collectors and scholars who rely on their expertise to build coherent and valuable libraries. Experienced dealers can recommend texts that complement existing collections, identify gaps in scholarly coverage, and suggest acquisitions that will enhance the overall value and utility of a library. The preservation services offered by some merchants include restoration of damaged manuscripts, rebinding of deteriorated volumes, and the creation of protective containers for particularly valuable texts. These services require specialized skills and materials that are not readily available elsewhere, making the merchants essential partners in the ongoing effort to preserve Timbuktu's manuscript heritage. The cultural impact of the manuscript trade extends far beyond its immediate economic effects to encompass its role in maintaining Timbuktu's position as a center of Islamic learning. The availability of books from across the Islamic world ensures that local scholars have access to the latest developments in their fields, while the presence of visiting buyers and sellers creates opportunities for intellectual exchange that enrich the city's scholarly life. The legacy of Timbuktu's manuscript merchants lives on in the collections they helped assemble and the scholarly traditions they supported through their commercial activities. Their dedication to the book trade represents more than mere business acumen. It reflects a deep commitment to the preservation and dissemination of knowledge that serves the highest purposes of Islamic civilization and human culture as a whole. The heavy wooden door creaks open as I am welcomed into the inner sanctum of the Haidara family compound, where Abdelkader Haidara, the legendary guardian of manuscripts, shows me the elaborate hiding places and preservation systems that have protected Timbuktu's literary treasures for generations. Here, in rooms that appear ordinary to casual observers, lies one of the world's most important manuscript collections, safeguarded by a family whose dedication to preserving knowledge has become the stuff of legend throughout the Islamic world. The Mama Haidara Commemorative Library, named after Abdelkader's father, houses over 18,000 manuscripts that represent the accumulated wisdom of centuries, each volume carefully catalogued and preserved according to methods passed down through generations of scholarly guardians. The collection itself tells the story of a family's unwavering commitment to protecting humanity's intellectual heritage, even when such dedication requires personal sacrifice and constant vigilance against the forces that would destroy or disperse these irreplaceable treasures. I watch as Abdelkader demonstrates the ingenious storage systems developed by his ancestors to protect manuscripts from both environmental threats and human predators. Hidden compartments built into the walls conceal the most valuable texts, while false floors and secret rooms provide additional layers of security for collections that represent not only immense monetary value, but also the irreplaceable cultural heritage of West Africa and the broader Islamic world. The preservation techniques employed by the Haidara family combine traditional methods with innovations developed through centuries of practical experience. Each manuscript is wrapped in specially treated leather that has been infused with aromatic oils to repel insects, while the storage rooms themselves are designed with careful attention to ventilation, humidity control, and temperature regulation. The family has developed its own formulas for protective compounds, mixing plant extracts and mineral substances according to recipes that are closely guarded family secrets. The cataloging system used by the family represents a masterpiece of bibliographic organization that allows for quick identification and retrieval of specific texts while maintaining detailed records of each manuscript's condition, provenance, and scholarly significance. The catalog itself has become a valuable scholarly resource, consulted by researchers from around the world who seek to understand the scope and importance of Timbuktu's manuscript heritage. The daily routines of manuscript care require constant attention and meticulous adherence to procedures that have been refined over generations. Each morning begins with inspection of the storage areas for signs of insect activity, moisture damage, or other threats to the collection's integrity. Manuscripts are rotated regularly to prevent permanent creasing or compression, while the most fragile texts receive special attention that may include careful cleaning, minor repairs, and replacement of deteriorated protective wrappings. The family's role as guardians extends beyond mere preservation to encompass their function as gatekeepers who control access to texts that are consulted by scholars from around the world. Serious researchers must demonstrate their qualifications and scholarly purposes before being granted permission to examine the most valuable manuscripts, while the family maintains detailed records of who has consulted which texts and for what purposes. The economic challenges of maintaining such an extensive collection require creative solutions that balance the family's commitment to preservation with the practical realities of funding conservation efforts. The Haidara family has developed relationships with international institutions and donors who support their work, while also engaging in carefully controlled commercial activities such as the sale of manuscript copies and the provision of consulting services to other collectors. The educational mission of the family library extends beyond its role as a repository to encompass its function as a center for scholarly research and training. Advanced students and visiting scholars are welcomed as temporary residents who contribute to the intellectual life of the compound while gaining access to texts that exist nowhere else in the world. These relationships create networks of scholarly collaboration that connect the Haidara Library to research institutions across the globe. The security measures protecting the collection reflect both traditional concerns about theft and modern awareness of political instability and cultural destruction. The family has developed elaborate contingency plans for protecting their manuscripts in case of emergency.
including the creation of detailed inventories, the establishment of secure storage facilities in multiple locations, and the maintenance of relationships with trusted allies who could assist in evacuation efforts if necessary. The digitization efforts undertaken by the family in partnership with international organizations represent a new chapter in their preservation mission, creating electronic copies that can survive even if the original manuscripts are lost or destroyed. This work requires careful balance between the desire to make texts widely available and the need to protect the physical manuscripts from damage that might result from excessive handling during the scanning process. The spiritual dimension of the family's guardianship role transforms what might otherwise be mere collecting into a form of religious devotion. The Haidara family understands that they serve as temporary custodians of knowledge that belongs ultimately to God and to humanity as a whole, a responsibility that requires not only technical expertise but also moral commitment and spiritual discipline. The international recognition of the family's work has brought both opportunities and challenges, as increased attention from scholars and media has raised awareness of Timbuktu's manuscript heritage while also creating new security concerns and preservation pressures. The family must navigate carefully between their desire to share their treasures with the world and their primary obligation to protect the manuscripts for future generations. The training of younger family members in the arts of manuscript preservation ensures that the guardianship tradition will continue into the future, with each generation learning not only the technical skills required for conservation work, but also the ethical principles that guide the family's approach to their responsibilities. This education begins in childhood and continues throughout life, creating a deep understanding of the sacred nature of their mission. The legacy of the Haidara family's guardianship extends far beyond their own collection to encompass their role as leaders in the broader effort to preserve Timbuktu's manuscript heritage. Their expertise and experience have made them valuable advisors to other families and institutions, while their advocacy for manuscript preservation has helped raise international awareness of the threats facing these irreplaceable cultural treasures. The courage demonstrated by the family during times of crisis, including their heroic efforts to evacuate manuscripts during the 2012 occupation of Timbuktu, has earned them recognition as true heroes of cultural preservation, whose dedication to protecting knowledge transcends personal safety and comfort. Their example inspires others to take up the cause of manuscript preservation and demonstrates the power of individual commitment to serve the highest purposes of human civilization.
The sound of distant gunfire echoes across the desert as I witness the desperate evacuation of Timbuktu's manuscript collections, watching as families who have guarded these treasures for centuries make the agonizing decision to abandon their ancestral homes in order to save the books that represent their most precious inheritance. Here, in the chaos of 2012, as Islamist militants advance on the city with their destructive ideology and contempt for learning, the true heroism of Timbuktu's scholars reveals itself in their willingness to risk everything to preserve humanity's intellectual heritage. The evacuation begins in darkness, with trusted allies moving through the city's narrow streets carrying wooden chests and leather satchels filled with manuscripts that have survived wars, famines, and centuries of environmental challenges, only to face their greatest threat from those who would destroy knowledge itself. Each family must make impossible choices about which texts to save and which to leave behind, knowing that every manuscript abandoned might be lost forever to the flames of fanaticism. I follow a convoy of vehicles as they make their way south toward Bamako, their precious cargo hidden beneath everyday goods and personal belongings to avoid detection by militants who have declared war on the intellectual traditions that made Timbuktu famous throughout the Islamic world. The drivers navigate by moonlight, avoiding main roads and checkpoints where discovery could mean not only the loss of irreplaceable manuscripts, but also imprisonment or death for those brave enough to defy the occupiers' edicts. The organizational genius behind this massive rescue operation belongs to Abdelkader Haidara, and his network of scholars, librarians, and ordinary citizens who understand that they are engaged in a race against time to save treasures that belong not just to Timbuktu, but to all humanity. Working with minimal resources and under constant threat of discovery, they coordinate the movement of nearly 350,000 manuscripts in an operation that rivals the Great Library evacuations of World War II in its scope and urgency. The physical challenges of moving such a vast collection require innovative solutions developed under extreme pressure. Manuscripts must be packed in ways that protect them from damage during transport while concealing their true nature from hostile observers. The evacuators develop new techniques for wrapping and cushioning delicate texts, using materials ranging from traditional leather and cloth to modern plastic sheeting and foam padding. The psychological toll of the evacuation weighs heavily on families who must watch their ancestral libraries disappear into the night, uncertain whether they will ever see their treasures again or return to homes that may be destroyed in their absence. The decision to evacuate represents not just a practical response to immediate danger, but also a profound act of faith in the future, a belief that knowledge will ultimately triumph over ignorance and that the manuscripts will someday return to their rightful home. The network of safe houses and storage facilities established in Bamako represents a triumph of improvisation and community cooperation, as ordinary citizens open their homes and businesses to accommodate collections that require specialized care and security. Warehouses, private residences, and even hotel rooms are transformed into temporary libraries where manuscripts await the day when they can safely return to Timbuktu. The international response to the crisis reveals both the global significance of Timbuktu's manuscripts and the limitations of external assistance in protecting cultural heritage during times of conflict. While international organizations express concern and offer support, the actual work of preservation falls primarily to local heroes who risk their lives to save their intellectual inheritance without expectation of reward or recognition. The destruction that does occur serves as a tragic reminder of what might have been lost if not for the courage and foresight of those who organized the evacuation. The burning of manuscripts at the Ahmed Baba Institute, while devastating in its own right, represents only a tiny fraction of what could have been destroyed if the militants had gained access to the city's private collections. The smoke rising from the institute becomes a symbol of the eternal struggle between knowledge and ignorance, civilization and barbarism. The hidden manuscripts that remain in Timbuktu during the occupation demonstrate the ingenuity and determination of families who choose to stay and protect their collections through concealment rather than evacuation. These guardians develop elaborate hiding places, burying manuscripts in the desert, concealing them in false walls, and distributing them among trusted neighbors who understand the sacred nature of their temporary custody. The documentation efforts that accompany the evacuation ensure that even if manuscripts are lost or damaged, their contents will not disappear entirely from human knowledge. Scholars work frantically to photograph and catalog texts before they are packed for transport, creating digital records that serve as insurance against the ultimate catastrophe of total loss. The solidarity displayed by Timbuktu's scholarly community during the crisis transcends traditional boundaries of family, ethnicity, and social class as people unite around their shared commitment to preserving knowledge. Families who have guarded their collections jealously for generations suddenly open their libraries to evacuation efforts, understanding that survival requires cooperation and mutual support. The role of women in the evacuation efforts, while often overlooked in official accounts, proves crucial to the operation's success. Women serve as couriers, safe house operators, and guardians of hidden manuscripts, their traditional roles in society providing cover for activities that would attract suspicion if undertaken by men. Their courage and dedication demonstrate that the love of learning transcends gender boundaries in Timbuktu's scholarly culture. The technological challenges of preserving manuscripts in temporary storage facilities require rapid adaptation of traditional conservation methods to new circumstances.
Without access to specialized equipment and climate-controlled environments, the evacuated collections face new threats from humidity, temperature fluctuations, and overcrowding that require constant vigilance and creative problem-solving. The emotional impact of separation from their manuscripts affects the evacuated families in ways that outsiders struggle to understand. For these guardians of knowledge, the books are not merely possessions, but extensions of their identity and purpose in life. The forced separation creates a form of grief that can only be healed by reunion with their intellectual children. The legacy of the 2012 evacuation extends far beyond the immediate preservation of manuscripts to encompass its demonstration of the power of human commitment to transcend the forces of destruction and ignorance. The heroes of this operation prove that knowledge, when defended by those who truly understand its value, can survive even the most determined efforts to destroy it, emerging stronger and more precious for having been tested in the crucible of crisis.
The morning sun illuminates the dusty streets of Bamako as I witness the painstaking work of modern archaeologists of knowledge, scholars and conservators who sift through the evacuated manuscript collections like treasure hunters uncovering lost civilizations. Here, in warehouses and temporary storage facilities throughout Mali's capital, teams of international experts work alongside local scholars to catalog, digitize, and preserve the literary treasures that were spirited away from Timbuktu during the dark days of occupation. The Hill Museum and Manuscript Library team from Minnesota works with methodical precision, their high-resolution cameras capturing every detail of manuscripts that have remained hidden from scholarly view for centuries. Each page is photographed under carefully controlled lighting conditions, creating digital archives that will make these texts accessible to researchers around the world while protecting the fragile originals from the damage that repeated handling might cause. I observe the delicate process of manuscript assessment as conservators examine texts that have survived not only centuries of desert conditions, but also the trauma of hasty evacuation and temporary storage in less than ideal circumstances. Some manuscripts show signs of damage from their recent ordeal, water stains from leaking roofs, insect damage from inadequate storage, and mechanical stress from hurried packing, while others emerge from their protective wrappings in remarkably good condition. The cataloging work reveals treasures that have been unknown to the outside world for generations, including original works by Timbuktu scholars whose names appear in historical records but whose writings were thought to be lost forever. Dr. Stephanie Diakite, the American preservation expert who helped coordinate the evacuation, describes the excitement of discovering a previously unknown commentary on Islamic law or a unique copy of an astronomical treatise that exists nowhere else in the world. The technological infrastructure required for this massive digitization project represents a marriage of cutting-edge equipment with traditional scholarly methods. Specialized scanners designed for fragile historical documents work alongside computers equipped with software that can enhance faded text and correct for distortions caused by age and handling. The resulting digital files are stored in multiple formats and locations to ensure their long-term preservation and accessibility. The international collaboration that makes this work possible brings together expertise from institutions across the globe, each contributing specialized knowledge and resources to the common goal of preserving Timbuktu's manuscript heritage. The University of Cape Town provides expertise in Arabic paleography, while German institutions contribute conservation techniques developed for medieval European manuscripts. American universities offer technological resources and funding, while Malian scholars provide essential knowledge of local languages and cultural contexts. The discovery process continues to yield surprises as scholars work their way through collections that have never been systematically cataloged. A manuscript that appears to be a simple copy of a well-known text may contain marginal notes by a famous scholar, while a seemingly minor work on a specialized topic may prove to be the only surviving copy of an important treatise. Each discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle of West African intellectual history.
The conservation challenges posed by the evacuated manuscripts require innovative solutions that adapt traditional preservation techniques to the realities of working in temporary facilities with limited resources. Conservators develop new methods for cleaning manuscripts without access to specialized laboratories, while creating protective storage systems using locally available materials that can safeguard texts until they can be returned to proper library conditions. The linguistic diversity of the collections reflects the cosmopolitan nature of Timbuktu's scholarly tradition, with manuscripts written not only in Arabic but also in local African languages using Arabic script. These Ajami texts provide unique insights into the intellectual life of West African Muslim communities, preserving knowledge and traditions that exist nowhere else in written form. The metadata creation process that accompanies digitization ensures that the resulting digital archives will be searchable and useful to researchers who may never have the opportunity to visit Timbuktu or handle the original manuscripts. Each text is assigned detailed descriptive information that includes not only basic bibliographic data, but also information about its physical condition, provenance, and scholarly significance. The training programs that accompany the digitization project help build local capacity for manuscript preservation and research, ensuring that Malian scholars will be able to continue this work long after the international teams have departed. Young Malians learn to operate scanning equipment, create digital archives, and apply conservation techniques that will serve them throughout their careers as guardians of their cultural heritage.
The funding challenges that face long-term preservation efforts require creative partnerships between international donors, local institutions, and private collectors who understand the global significance of Timbuktu's manuscripts. The costs of proper conservation and digitization are enormous, while the benefits accrue not to any single institution but to humanity as a whole, making it difficult to secure sustained financial support. The ethical questions raised by international involvement in preserving African manuscripts require careful navigation of issues related to cultural ownership, scholarly access, and the rights of local communities. While international assistance is essential for the preservation work, it must be provided in ways that respect the autonomy and dignity of the Malian scholars and families who are the true owners of these intellectual treasures. The research opportunities created by the digitization project open new avenues for understanding the intellectual history of medieval Africa and its connections to the broader Islamic world. Scholars can now compare texts from Timbuktu with manuscripts in libraries from Morocco to Indonesia, tracing the circulation of ideas and the development of scholarly traditions across vast geographical and temporal distances. The public outreach efforts that accompany the preservation work help raise awareness of Africa's rich intellectual heritage and challenge stereotypes about the continent's historical contributions to world civilization. Online exhibitions, educational programs, and media coverage bring the story of Timbuktu's manuscripts to global audiences who may never have known about this remarkable cultural treasure. The long-term vision for the digitized collections includes not only preservation and access, but also the development of new research tools and methodologies that will help scholars extract maximum value from these unique resources. Advanced text analysis software, machine learning algorithms, and collaborative research platforms promise to revolutionize the study of medieval Islamic scholarship and African intellectual history. The hope that drives this massive preservation effort is that someday the manuscripts will return safely to Timbuktu, where they belong, and that the digital archives being created today will serve as both backup copies and global access points for treasures that represent one of humanity's most important intellectual legacies. Until that day comes, the work continues in Bamako and beyond, as modern guardians of knowledge carry forward the mission that has defined Timbuktu for over a millennium. The soft hum of high-resolution scanners fills the climate-controlled preservation laboratory as I witness the marriage of ancient wisdom and modern technology, where manuscripts that have survived centuries in the desert now face their greatest challenge and opportunity in the digital age. Here, in facilities that represent the cutting edge of conservation science,
Teams of specialists work with microscopic precision to capture every detail of texts that may crumble to dust even as they are being saved for eternity. The scanning process itself is a delicate dance between preservation and access, as conservators must balance the need to create comprehensive digital records with the imperative to minimize handling of manuscripts that grow more fragile with each passing year. Each page is positioned with surgical precision under cameras capable of capturing details invisible to the naked eye, while specialized lighting systems reveal faded text and hidden annotations that have been lost to centuries of desert sun and shifting sands. I watch as Dr. Maria Santos, a conservation specialist from the University of Hamburg, examines a 15th century astronomical treatise whose pages have begun to separate along the binding. Her trained eye identifies areas of particular vulnerability, while her hands, protected by cotton gloves, support the manuscript in ways that distribute stress evenly across its structure. Every movement is calculated to extract maximum information while causing minimum damage to an artifact that represents irreplaceable human heritage. The technological infrastructure supporting this preservation effort represents millions of dollars in specialized equipment designed specifically for handling historical documents. The scanners themselves are marvels of engineering, capable of capturing images at resolutions high enough to reveal the individual fibers in handmade paper, while maintaining color accuracy that preserves the subtle variations in medieval inks and pigments. The digital files created through this process are more than mere photographs. They are comprehensive records that capture not only the visual appearance of each page, but also detailed information about its physical composition, chemical composition, and structural integrity. Multispectral imaging reveals text that has been erased or overwritten, while ultraviolet photography exposes damage invisible under normal lighting conditions. The storage and management of the resulting digital archives requires sophisticated systems designed to ensure long-term accessibility and preservation. Multiple copies of each file are stored in different formats and locations, while detailed metadata ensures that future researchers will be able to find and use the materials effectively. The challenge is not just preserving the data, but making it discoverable and useful to scholars who may approach these texts with questions that their creators never imagined.
The international collaboration that makes this work possible brings together expertise from institutions across the globe, each contributing specialized knowledge and resources to the common goal of preserving Timbuktu's manuscript heritage. The University of Cape Town provides expertise in Arabic paleography, while German institutions contribute conservation techniques developed for medieval European manuscripts. American universities offer technological resources and funding, while Malian scholars provide essential knowledge of local languages and cultural contexts. The discovery process continues to yield surprises as scholars work their way through collections that have never been systematically cataloged. A manuscript that appears to be a simple copy of a well-known text may contain marginal notes by a famous scholar, while a seemingly minor work on a specialized topic may prove to be the only surviving copy of an important treatise. Each discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle of West African intellectual history. The conservation challenges posed by the evacuated manuscripts require innovative solutions that adapt traditional preservation techniques to the realities of working in temporary facilities with limited resources. Conservators develop new methods for cleaning manuscripts without access to specialized laboratories, while creating protective storage systems using locally available materials that can safeguard texts until they can be returned to proper library conditions. The linguistic diversity of the collections reflects the cosmopolitan nature of Timbuktu's scholarly tradition, with manuscripts written not only in Arabic but also in local African languages using Arabic script. These Ajami texts provide unique insights into the intellectual life of West African Muslim communities, preserving knowledge and traditions that exist nowhere else in written form.
The metadata creation process that accompanies digitization ensures that the resulting digital archives will be searchable and useful to researchers who may never have the opportunity to visit Timbuktu or handle the original manuscripts. Each text is assigned detailed descriptive information that includes not only basic bibliographic data, but also information about its physical condition, provenance, and scholarly significance. The training programs that accompany the digitization project help build local capacity for manuscript preservation and research, ensuring that Malian scholars will be able to continue this work long after the international teams have departed. Young Malians learn to operate scanning equipment, create digital archives, and apply conservation techniques that will serve them throughout their careers as guardians of their cultural heritage. The public outreach potential of digitized manuscripts extends far beyond academic research to include educational programs, online exhibitions, and cultural initiatives that can bring the treasures of Timbuktu to global audiences. Virtual reality technologies may someday allow people around the world to experience these manuscripts as if they were handling the originals, while artificial intelligence could help translate and interpret texts in ways that make them accessible to non-specialists. The funding challenges that face long-term digital preservation require sustained commitment from institutions and donors who understand that the benefits of this work will accrue to humanity as a whole rather than to any single organization or nation. The costs of maintaining digital archives over decades or centuries are substantial, while the technologies required for access continue to evolve in ways that may make today's formats obsolete. The backup and redundancy systems built into the digital preservation infrastructure reflect hard-learned lessons about the fragility of electronic media and the importance of multiple preservation strategies. While digital files may seem more durable than physical manuscripts, they face their own threats from technological obsolescence, data corruption, and institutional failure that require constant vigilance and periodic migration to new formats. The hope that drives this massive preservation effort extends beyond the immediate goal of saving individual manuscripts to encompass a broader vision of cultural preservation and global access to human knowledge. The digital archives being created today may outlast the physical manuscripts they document, serving as permanent records of intellectual achievements that might otherwise be lost to time, conflict, or environmental disaster. The legacy of this preservation work will be measured not only in the number of manuscripts saved, but in the new understanding of African intellectual history that emerges from their study. These digital archives represent more than backup copies. They are tools for discovery that will enable future generations of scholars to ask new questions and find new answers in texts that have waited centuries for the right technology to unlock their secrets. The evening light fades over the Niger River as I sit in contemplation among the digital archives that now preserve the voices of Timbuktu's scholars for eternity, their wisdom transformed into streams of light and data that flow across fiber optic cables to reach seekers of knowledge in every corner of the world. Here, in this quiet moment between day and night, I feel the presence of all those who have dedicated their lives to preserving these treasures, the medieval scribes who first set pen to parchment, the family guardians who protected manuscripts through centuries of upheaval, and the modern heroes who risked everything to save them from destruction. The manuscripts themselves have become something more than physical objects. They are bridges across time that connect us to minds that grappled with the same fundamental questions that occupy human consciousness today. In their pages, astronomers calculated the movements of celestial bodies with instruments no more sophisticated than astrolabes and careful observation, yet achieved accuracies that rival modern measurements. Physicians described treatments for diseases that still challenge medical science, while philosophers explored the nature of existence with insights that remain profound and relevant. The digital preservation of these texts represents more than technological achievement. It embodies humanity's eternal struggle against the forces of forgetting and destruction that would erase our collective memory. Each scanned page is a small victory against time itself, a declaration that knowledge belongs not to any single generation, but to all who will come after us. The scholars of medieval Timbuktu could never have imagined that their words would someday travel at the speed of light to reach readers they could never meet. Yet their commitment to preserving wisdom for future generations makes them partners in this digital resurrection. The voices that speak to us from these ancient pages carry messages that transcend the specific circumstances of their creation. A treatise on Islamic law written in 14th century Timbuktu addresses questions of justice and social order that remain relevant in our contemporary world. A medical text describing the treatment of desert ailments contains insights into the relationship between environment and health that modern medicine is only beginning to appreciate. A work of astronomy that maps the southern sky preserves observations that contribute to our understanding of celestial mechanics and the history of scientific thought. The preservation efforts that have brought these manuscripts into the digital age represent a form of time travel that allows us to participate in conversations that began centuries ago and will continue long after we are gone. The scholars who created these texts wrote not just for their immediate contemporaries, but for an imagined future audience that would value their contributions to human knowledge. We are that audience, and our responsibility extends beyond mere preservation to include interpretation, understanding, and transmission to those who will follow us. The technology that makes digital preservation possible creates new forms of immortality for ideas that might otherwise perish with their physical substrates. While the original manuscripts remain vulnerable to fire, flood, war, and the simple passage of time, their digital avatars can be copied infinitely without degradation, stored in multiple locations, and accessed simultaneously by researchers around the world. This multiplication of access democratizes knowledge in ways that the original creators could never have envisioned. The global community of scholars that now studies these digitized manuscripts represents the fulfillment of Timbuktu's medieval vision of universal learning. Students in universities from Tokyo to Sao Paulo can now examine the same texts that once required dangerous journeys across the Sahara to consult. The barriers of geography, politics, and economics that once limited access to these treasures have been dissolved by technologies that make knowledge truly universal. The global community of scholars that now studies these digitized manuscripts represents the fulfillment of Timbuktu's medieval vision of universal learning. Students in universities from Tokyo to Sao Paulo can now examine the same texts that once required dangerous journeys across the Sahara to consult. The barriers of geography, politics, and economics that once limited access to these treasures have been dissolved by technologies that make knowledge truly universal. The artificial intelligence systems that are beginning to analyze these texts promise to reveal patterns and connections that human scholars might never discover on their own. Machine learning algorithms can compare thousands of manuscripts simultaneously, identifying influences, tracing the evolution of ideas, and discovering relationships between texts that were separated by centuries and continents. These digital tools extend human intelligence rather than replacing it, creating new possibilities for understanding the complex networks of knowledge that connected medieval Islamic civilization. The preservation of these manuscripts in digital form ensures that future catastrophes cannot erase them entirely from human memory. Even if the physical texts were to be destroyed, if the libraries that house them were to burn, if the cities that treasure them were to disappear beneath the sands, the digital copies would survive as permanent records of human achievement. This redundancy provides a form of insurance against the ultimate catastrophe of total loss.
The educational potential of digitized manuscripts extends far beyond academic research to include their use in schools, museums, and cultural centers around the world. Children who will never visit Timbuktu can now explore its intellectual treasures through virtual exhibitions and interactive programs that bring the past to life. These educational applications help ensure that the knowledge preserved in the manuscripts will continue to inspire new generations of learners and thinkers. The economic development opportunities created by digital preservation include the potential for cultural tourism, educational services, and research partnerships that could benefit the communities that have served as guardians of these treasures for centuries. While the manuscripts themselves are priceless cultural artifacts, their digital preservation creates new forms of value that can support the ongoing work of conservation and scholarship. The spiritual dimension of this preservation work connects us to the deepest motivations of those who created and protected these manuscripts through the centuries. For them, knowledge was not merely information, but a form of divine revelation that deserved reverence and protection. Their understanding that learning serves purposes beyond immediate practical application continues to inspire those who work to preserve their legacy for future generations. As the stars emerge over the ancient city where this story began, I understand that the preservation of Timbuktu's manuscripts represents more than the salvation of old books. It embodies humanity's commitment to memory, learning, and the belief that knowledge transcends the boundaries of time, space, and mortality. The voices of the scholars continue to whisper across the centuries, carried now not only by desert winds, but by the invisible networks that connect all seekers of truth in an eternal conversation about the nature of existence and our place within the cosmic order. The candles that once illuminated these texts have been replaced by the glow of computer screens, but the light they cast remains the same. The light of human curiosity, dedication, and hope that knowledge will always find a way to survive and flourish, no matter what forces may arise to threaten its existence. The last scanner falls silent as night embraces the preservation laboratory, and I feel the gentle presence of countless scholars whose voices now live forever in streams of digital light. The manuscripts rest safely in their climate-controlled chambers, their ancient wisdom transformed into eternal data that will outlive the paper and ink from which it was born, yet somehow retaining the soul of every hand that ever touched these sacred pages. In the growing darkness, I see the flicker of oil lamps that once illuminated these texts merging with the soft glow of computer screens, creating a bridge of light that spans the centuries. The reed pens of medieval scribes dance in harmony with modern keyboards, while the whispered prayers of ancient scholars blend with the quiet hum of servers that now guard their intellectual children. The desert wind carries echoes of all who have served as guardians of knowledge, the patient copyists working through countless nights, the brave families who hid manuscripts in secret places, the heroes who risked everything to save these treasures from destruction. Their dedication flows onward like an underground river, surfacing wherever human hands reach toward wisdom and understanding. The voices of Timbuktu's scholars continue to teach across the vast distances of time and space, their words no longer confined to candlelit rooms, but traveling at light speed to reach minds they could never have imagined. Each digitized page becomes a seed of possibility, waiting to sprout new insights in the consciousness of future seekers who will discover their own truths in these ancient texts. As sleep approaches, I feel myself wrapped in the collective memory of all who have loved learning enough to preserve it against the forces of forgetting. The manuscripts breathe softly in their protective chambers, their secrets safe for generations yet unborn, while their digital spirits dance through networks that span the globe like constellations of pure thought. Good night, guardian of ancient wisdom. May your dreams be illuminated by the eternal flame of knowledge, and may you wake with the understanding that every act of learning honors those who sacrificed to keep the light of scholarship burning through the darkest nights of human history.